Hello everyone, how are we doing this evening? Good, I hope. I was doing some reading and I discovered something that I thought was very, very interesting, and I wanted to share it with you. And it's basically about this cat named Nathan Green. Now, I took a bunch of notes because I want to try to keep this accurate but brief, because I know a long history lesson can be boring. But Nathan Green, born in Maryland about 1820 or so. Now, Nathan is a black man, so he was a slave in 1820. I believe born into slavery. At some point in the mid 1800s, so around 1850 or so maybe, he ended up in Tennessee, and a firm known as Landis and Green, which I believe is probably where he got his last name. So a company known as Landis and Green leased Nathan to a local preacher, Christian preacher named Dan Call. Now, Dan had a farm in Lincoln County, Tennessee, a large farm, and Nathan was leased to Dan to really run his side whiskey business. Now, Reverend Call knew that Nathan had developed a reputation, I guess, as a young man, making some pretty decent whiskey, and Mr. Call wanted in on that. And one of the things that Nathan did so well was a process called sugar maple charcoal filtering, which many believe that Nathan was taught by his family, handed down probably from the continent of Africa, not sure which country. That's how they would filter their water and other things, using this charcoal process. Well, Mr. Call, or Reverend Call, again, was making sort of whiskey on the side for extra money, so on and so forth. And this went on for years. And at some point, a young white man or white boy named Jasper was basically sent to Reverend Call, and he worked and was paid, unlike Nathan, to be like a chore boy. He's a young kid and who was struggling. I guess his mother had recently passed away and kind of needed something to do outside of sitting at home. So he worked for Reverend Call on the farm doing chores and whatnot. And eventually, over time, took an interest in what was going on in one of the buildings on the farm, where Nathan was making this whiskey that was being sold about. Eventually, Jasper became Nathan's sort of apprentice, if you will, and started to learn the process, which at that point had become known as the Lincoln process for making this whiskey. That sugar maple charcoal filter process is now known as the Lincoln process. Well, as time passes, obviously we get in the midst of the Civil War. The Civil War ends in 1865. The 13th Amendment is ratified, much to the chagrin of the South, and all African Americans, black folks, are now freed. Well, about this time, Jasper has been selling this whiskey and making some decent money doing it over the years, and he ends up partnering with Reverend Call, and has ideas of taking the distillery from more of a moonshine standard, if you will, to an actual business. And they're rather successful, and over time, actually, Jasper is able to buy out Reverend Call and take over this farm making whiskey. And Jasper asked Nathan, whose nickname is Nearest. No one really knows why his name's Nearest, although I think there was some census taken, and Nathan had written his name spelled oddly where you might pronounce it Nearest. He probably Nathan probably could not read or write. I don't know if that's true or not, but all his pals called him Nearest Green. Well, Jasper asked Nearest, to stay on and continue to be his master distiller. Time passes. Now Nathan and his wife ultimately have like 11 children, and several of Nathan or Nearest's children end up working for Jasper at this distillery. And it continues to grow, and time passes, and Jasper decides to take this business. He's bought some new land in Lynchburg, and I don't know, several hundred acres, I would imagine. And he wants Nearest to come with him and continue to be his master distiller. Now, Nearest declines because he's retiring now, but his sons, go with Jasper to Lynchburg. Now, that business, eventually, the Jasper starts in Lynchburg, continues to grow, and eventually it changes the world. Now, Jasper is his given name. Jasper, and his middle name was Newton. His full name was Jasper Newton Daniel, but his friends called him Jack. And the whiskey that he made, Jack Daniel's number 7, which is that process we just talked about, that sugar maple charcoal filtration. Lynchburg, Tennessee. So Jasper Daniel, to his friends Jack Daniel, goes on to change the world. Now, interesting thing, time passes, nothing's really talked about. The reality is that the process that Jack Daniel's, probably the most famous whiskey, arguably in the world. Here it's common whiskey. If you leave this country, it's really sought after. Every rock and roller drinks Jack Daniel's number 7. I'll show you in a second. Anyway, I'm digressing. But so we flash forward a number of years, and Nathan Green kind of disappears in history and isn't spoke of too much. We flash forward to the modern era, and a young lady named Fawn Weaver. Here, take a look. Here's a photo of Fawn. Right. So Fawn Weaver, who's the daughter of, oddly enough, Frank Wilson, who is a Motown songwriter. He's famous for the song Love Child and Castles in the Sand. Anyway, Fawn is an author. She writes romance novels, but she's married to a cat named Keith Weaver, who's vice president of Sony Pictures. They're on vacation in Singapore in the somewhere in the 2000s, and she hears the story of Nathan or Nearest Green and becomes very, very interested. Well, when she gets back to America, she immediately flies to Tennessee, and lo and behold, she finds out that the original Dan Call farm or ranch, if you will, still exists. She buys it in some adjoining acreage, and she starts talking to the folks that own Jack Daniel's, which is, keep in mind, the Daniels family sold the whiskey business to a company called Brown-Forman in like 1956 for a pantload of money. And Brown-Forman has owned the Jack Daniel's brand since the mid-50s. Talked to them, and they agreed in 2016, I think, to formally acknowledge that the master distiller that did Jack Daniel's was Nathan Green. And what Miss Weaver does after she purchases that land, she tracks down the great-great-granddaughter, Victoria Eddie Butler, and she creates or starts this, Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, or whiskey. She starts this whole company on the very property that the Victoria Eddie Butler's great-great-grandfather, Nathan Green, worked at, in the 1850s. 170 years ago, and it's an award-winning whiskey, and I was just drinking it, and I know what you're asking. Hey, does Uncle Nearest. Now this is the, I don't know, what is this? This is the premium. Does this taste close to Jackie D? Well, if you look at the color there, similar in color? And I actually bought, this is kind of their standard. The proof's down. I think this is 93, this is 100. I'm saving this bottle. My buddy Mikey and I are going to try this out, but I had to taste this. I actually have a rye whiskey too. Anyway, is it similar to Jack Daniel's? Is it good? This is $60. I don't know, what's a fifth of Jack cost? 30, so 30, 35, so it's maybe twice the money. Boy, is it smooth though. Is it better than, I wouldn't make a Jack and Diet with this or a Uncle and Diet with this. I would with this. Obviously, it's very, very good. You need to try it for yourself. But what I was so fascinated about this whole process was not lost in history. A lot of folks have said that, Jasper Daniel tried to hide the fact that a black man had done that charcoal process, which is what makes Jack Daniel so famous. People who've taken the tour, I have not. They talk about it, but thanks to Fawn. You know what? Here's a picture of Victoria as well. Here's a couple pictures. There's no known photographs of Nathan Green. This is a photograph of his son George sitting next to an older Jasper Daniel. Forgive the accent. Next to Jack Daniel. Take a look at these pictures, and I have something to say after. Here, take a look. So there's, again, Fawn, Victoria, George, Mr. Daniel. Some people have said that Jack Daniel tried to do, or Jasper Daniel tried to sort of hide Nathan Green's influence on any of it. And that's simply not true. I think given the time frame, it made a lot of sense. Obviously, it's difficult in the late 1800s for an African American to do anything really. Slavery had just ended, et cetera, and it sounds to me like Jack Daniel worshipped Nathan Green and only took what he had learned to new heights and employed his children. And it's just one of those things that was lost through time. And thank goodness for Fawn Weaver for whatever her research was. I don't know if it was for a book, whatever she was doing in Singapore. She stumbled upon the name and went to the folks that owned Jack Daniels, whose name I've already forgotten. One moment. Brown Foreman, and said, hey, you guys aren't really, I've been on the tour a couple times, you're not really mentioning Mr. Green at all. And they immediately said, yeah, you know what, we need to. No one was hiding it. It was just one of those things that was lost through time. But the benefit of Miss Weaver and then ultimately Miss Butler, the great-great-granddaughter of Nathan Green, was she took her, put her money where her mouth was. She bought that farm, and she's making booze. And it's really, really good, and it's won a number of awards, and I can't recommend it more highly. I really enjoy it. I can't wait to share it with Mike. But I was just so excited when I read this. I thought it was super interesting. Hopefully you did too. I'm starting to babble a bit. It's getting late. But anyway, if you like whiskey, bourbon, give Uncle Nearest a try. Again, there's Uncle Nearest. This is the premium. Here's just sort of their regular, the run-of-mill stuff. The dollar difference is it was just a few dollars difference. I have a rye somewhere. But just to show you how far Jack Daniels has gone and how popular, my good friend Alicia, this is Jack Daniels Sinatra. Take a look at that. This was Mr. Sinatra's, Jack Daniels was his favorite whiskey. And she was kind enough, she got a bottle for Mike and I to have. And I have actually tasted this. I've had this bottle before, and it is wonderful. Anyway, I'm digressing. Try some Uncle Nearest, help support him, do some reading, take a look at this Nathan Green, this nearest Green. He's kind of an interesting cat. Anyway, in this world, when you could be anything you want, you be kind, be humble, be forgiving, and drink more. Bye.